A couple of things to talk to you about, including an interesting story on the front page of the Times this morning, where Johnny Mercer has apparently exhibited some surprise at the fact that Number 10 is boosting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's profile at the expense of other people, and he's asking them if they wouldn't mind sort of pushing Penny Mordaunt and others more to the front line. I mean, he shouldn't be surprised at this, should he? I mean, Downing Street runs Downing Street. Downing Street works for the Prime Minister. Downing Street wouldn't be pushing other people who might seek to be Prime Minister in the future, would they?
Well, a clear trend in British politics of the last 10 or 20 years is it for it to become about one person rather than a government or a cabinet. So we're very used to the Prime Minister fronting everything in a way that I think if you went back 30, 40 years, certainly to Margaret Thatcher's time, I think there were much more powerful figures, more independent figures around the cabinet table. I get very used to hearing Rishi Sunak talking about what he has done rather than what his government has done. And that's just the trend. So that's not going to change quite clearly. I think the striking thing over the last year and a half is just how unpopular Rishi Sunak has become.
Yeah.
18 months ago, his party was incredibly unpopular. People were willing to give him a chance. 18 months on, they've made their decision. He's spectacularly unpopular, even more unpopular than his party.
Right.
There's clearly a great case, therefore, for trying to push other Conservative figures forward rather than the PM. But it may well be the PM's not going to listen to that lesson.
No, I don't think so. And I mean, obviously today he's feeling some little burst of sunshine. Not that we're seeing it in real terms on the streets, but the inflation figures coming down to 2.3%, a little bit less than perhaps even he thought they would do.
Yeah, it's a really important day for the government. The fact that the inflation figure finally begins with a 2, so therefore it's somewhere close to the government's target. It may not be quite as low as hoped, but you can understand why he's buoyed up by that. And, we're going to be sort of experiencing the sighs of relief blowing through Westminster and Whitehall. But of course, there's enormous caveats to that. One is there's no sign of an immediate cut in interest rate, which is the thing that might really cut through to the public. Secondly, as I think you were just hearing, the prices of food and energy are so much higher than they were 2 or 3 years ago. They're baked in and people know that. And therefore, the fact that they've stopped rising so much is of limited benefit. So I suppose, thirdly, if he thinks that this is going to save him at the general election, then he's almost certainly deluded.
Yeah, well, almost certainly he is. And I mean, I suppose the other breaking news this morning will be of some concern to him. Ireland, Norway and Spain officially recognising Palestine as a separate state. I mean, David Lammy's been in the news this week because he came out and said basically that if Labour were in government and this ICC warrant was issued, as it hasn't been yet for Benjamin Netanyahu, that Labour would honour that warrant and should honour that warrant, because it makes me wonder whether, I don't suppose Labour will have anything to say about this, but clearly Israel are not happy about it. And the fact that Ireland and Norway and Spain have officially recognised a place in which there are still hostages being held is going to put Labour and the Tories on sort of tenterhooks, isn't it?
Yeah, there's clearly a shift in many capitals towards recognising Palestine. That feels like quite a slow burn issue to me that's not really going to have any impact on British politics. But I think the ICC warrants, if they are issued, does potentially have an impact. And there the British government is out on a limb, isn't it, in comparison with most other Western governments. The UK is aligned with
not out on a limb when it comes to America. I mean, Americans have been much harder line than even Rishi Sunak was.
Yeah, I was just about to say the UK is aligned with the US in effectively attacking, or at least in the UK case, disputing whether the prosecutor should have done what he did, whereas Labour has taken the stance of most other Western governments, is that it's up to the ICC to decide. These are the experts. He's appointed a panel of eminent lawyers, many of them British, who have reached the conclusion that there is a case for issuing arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister, etc. And that's a matter for the ICC. And I think that it's controversial for the UK government to even suggest that the ICC should not be doing that, because frankly, it's none of the British government's business.
No, but I mean, what's people's business these days and what's not people's business these days seems to become a rather cloudy area, doesn't it? Finally, Paula Venables up in before the beak, if you like, on the Post Office inquiry today. First time she's going to speak on the subject, which I think an awful lot of people will be very keen to witness. We'll be bringing it to you here live on Talk as it happens, the Horizon IT scandal inquiry. One of the questions she's going to be asked is, did she lie to Parliament in 2015? I mean, if she admits to doing that, what happens then?
Well, there is a mechanism for certainly recalling, or at least in theory, taking action against somebody who's misled a parliamentary committee. I think you can be called before the bar of the House. It's a very, very rare occurrence, and I'm not suggesting it's going to happen in this case. But yeah, she is the focus, rightly, isn't she, of the anger of the postmasters, postmistresses, and the way that they were treated. It appears impossible to reconcile what she said to MPs and some of their other comments with the reality of what we know now about the way that the post office and the IT company behind it behaved. She is going to be on an incredibly sticky wicket. It's an extraordinary fall from grace, isn't it? She's, Church of England vicar. She's sort of spoken and written at length about morality in public life. And, I'm sorry, from where I sit, and most people, she seems to have fallen just catastrophically short of those standards.
Indeed.
She set it well.
I mean, at one point, I think she was going to be nominated by Archbishop Welby to be the Bishop of London, and she had to have that withdrawn as well. So, as you say, an extraordinary turnaround of events. So, anyway, much interest in that. We'll keep our eyes focused on that, of course, as well. Rob, thanks very much indeed. Rob Merrick, political journalist there, with a look at some of the stories that we're casting our eyes across this morning.